Hello everyone and welcome back. We're going to continue along here with our blockout and yeah, we're starting to connect these pieces. We're getting some more of the symmetrical stuff inside the middle, connecting both sides together and just sort of filling this up a little bit in the back here. This part might be a little bit shorter. I'd hopefully like to wrap this up without going too long or anything. I think it was 2 parts ago we were closer to an hour and a half. I want to keep these closer to an hour. But what we're doing right now is we have to insert this larger cylindrical piece that goes across. But I'm starting to understand a bit more of this puzzle piece that is the typewriter by looking at this black bar that we already made. It seems to dip under, wrap around, and connect to the back. As we can see here, so this piece goes under right here, connects at the back where there's another pole sticking across, which we did see in the actual reference as well. Sticks up and cuts across. So we're going to be working on that. Then we're going to put in the larger cylinder and then some of those connecting bars that are stretching across the end. Should be pretty easy to put into place afterwards. One thing to note is we definitely have a decent amount of these components in place already, so we might have to shimmy some things around as we go. But for the most part, it seems like things are lined up. We just need to get a rounded piece in here. I want to really make sure I have a good idea as to the shape of this and how far down it goes and all of that. Which it kind of seems it just sort of hugs this. It even goes behind this bolt here. It goes behind that and then wraps up. So we can go ahead and do that. And of course it is sticking out of this here. It seems to be coming out of this opening actually. So we can go ahead and hit Control-Shift-X to access our cutting tools. I'm going to go ahead and put 2 cuts in like this. And just flatten them out. Let's go ahead and we need to find a place we can snap it to keep it squared. And if we snap it to each side of this circle, that should do a pretty good job. So now we know these two are pretty squared off. Maybe we can scale it out a little bit. So we can sort of extrude out of here, wrap it around. I think a easy way to sort of work from this would be to put a ring shape in here like we've been doing before with this part here. So let's go ahead and put a ring shape, then we can model into it and then model out of it to go back up. Great, polygon primitives, and pipe was the one that we've been using. So let's go ahead and mess with some of these settings over here in the channel box layer editor. So subdivisions, we might as well crank that up. I'm gonna go with 36 for this specific one, just because we can definitely afford the roundness and it's gonna give us some wiggle room to sort of adjust things. We can even half it later on if we need to. And then how thick do I want this to be? It doesn't look like this piece is too thick or anything, so 0.1's a bit too thin, 0.15, maybe even 0.175. Yeah, that seems like it's right. We are going to be scaling this down a little bit, so I got to keep that in mind. As I get it into position here. So I'm going to want it to be just roughly in place, and this might just be way too big at the moment. But I want the curve to follow this at the beginning before it sticks back out. So I'm really only trying to get the curve about there. Looks pretty good. I kind of want it to be a bit thicker actually. Something like so. Let's just roughly position it. I'm just making sure that this piece connects into where I just added those cuts. Just kind of lining that up. Yeah, and it does seem to sort of follow this shape and then curve back up. I just want to see if this is just too big. I have a feeling that this is just far too large and it should probably be more like that. So I'm just looking through my reference right now. Goes across, down and around. So it is a bit tighter. It might even be a bit more like that. Let's try this one out. I'm going to go ahead and cut off this geometry here because I want this to go up straight. And then as for this side, I might as well cut off this geometry as well. Let's just make sure we're not missing anything. I'm just accessing wireframe mode up here. And I'm going to go ahead and extrude this up. Snap this to the top. We can also go ahead and make sure everything is level by selecting these faces and snapping them to the side. Selecting these faces and snapping them to this side. And let's just shimmy it left and right and see what's good. I do like the idea of it matching this curve quite a bit. Yeah, and it kind of seems like in most of the references that this pole is actually going through, if I'm not mistaken, because this is it here. And it's going, is that going through? If so, it's just the edge. I need to find a secondary one to confirm that. It does kind of seem like that. So for now, we're going to have it line up that way, where this pillar, this pole is actually cutting through. And in doing so, I do want to thin it out a little bit. Thin this guy out as well. It is just eyeballing, but I think for these, they should be fine. Get this guy nice and centered. And then one way I can get it to be a bit thicker is before we were trying to get the pivot to do all the work. I suppose another way that we could do it that I thought of is select these faces that we want to sort of scrunch in, hit Control E and just drag the thickness in. And that should do a pretty good job. Just trying to make sure it's kind of symmetrical. That should do a pretty good job of extruding it in evenly, and then we can just sort of isolate it, select these edges, Control Backspace, boom. Probably should have just done that from the start, because that's a much more efficient way of handling that. And we can sort of go ahead and start to sew this guy in here. So let's just isolate the pieces we need, which should be these two. And we can go ahead and delete this face. Gonna make sure that any of these unneeded vertices are gone so that we can go ahead and snap this to the top. Pretty simple. We can snap this over, mesh combine, merge vertices, and that should be one piece. Cool. Based on what I've been seeing with this piece, though, it seems to wrap and then stick straight up and sort of connect to this corner piece here, which means if we're going to try and get that angle, we're probably going to want to cut it off probably about here. Maybe even one more, but let's give this one a shot. That's a weird extrusion. Interesting. I'm going to fill hole and then try and extrude this face. because it's going to go along the normal of that face, and it seems to be pretty spot on with that, actually. I'm quite happy with how that turned out. It seems like this is looking like a good angle for us. Cool. From here, the end of this turns into a cylinder, and it has a bar that sticks across. I am also not entirely sure if this is something we're going to have to mirror over to the other side. The reference on this side is not super clear with how this is connected, but there is definitely a bar connected at some point. Let's try and look at the reference, our main reference for the typewriter we're making. Yeah, this guy... it has this piece sticking out, which I assume is the same connection piece. So for the sake of this, I'm going to do that. Because at the end of the day, what this piece we're making right now is doing is holding in this large cylindrical shape. And this piece sticking out kind of confirms that there's some sort of shape holding it in there. So I think it's safe to assume that we can actually mirror that piece over, which is pretty good. Just going to keep it a lot simpler for us. I am going to taper this off, though. I do want it to be a little bit thinner. All the references are showing that it's a bit thinner, so we can change our scale mode to component. So it's going to actually put our gizmo the same way our face is currently facing. And just sort of scale this all in. I'm going to do the same thing where I move this based on component and just sort of stick it out a little bit further. And then set it back to world afterwards. Cool. So yeah, we need a cylinder at the end of this so that we can sort of stick our rod through there. That shouldn't be too difficult to do. We're just going to have to put a cylinder on the end and weld it together. We've been doing a lot of welding, so you guys should be pretty comfortable with something like that. We have been recording for a little bit, so I do want to quickly save before we move forward. Okay, create polygon primitives cylinder. I believe by default it's 20-sided, and that's more than enough for something like this. Let's just rotate this guy into position, holding J to snap. We can also use this vertex here as sort of a midpoint, so I'm just snapping along the x-axis, and yep, getting him into place. So now we really just have to worry about the scale of this. It kind of seems like it's not too big. Kind of looks like it's rolling over around as well, which is kind of cool. And then not too wide either, just kind of a metal piece like that. Actually, it might just be flush with it. Might just be like so, but I think I want to have mine sticking out a little bit just for some more interesting bevels. The smoothing will actually look pretty cool if we have some nice polished transitions. So I'm going to just do it that way. To weld this guy in, what I'm going to do is, first of all, delete this face because we're going to combine them. We're going to need any faces that aren't being seen to disappear. I'm going to go ahead and add an edge loop here, an edge loop here. I'm sure you guys see where I'm going with this. Snap it over to the side, snap it to this guy, and then we can delete all of the faces that essentially aren't going to be used, which is going to be boom, 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 boom. And then we can just manually snap the verts on this object. Go 1, 2, and then this one I'm going to stretch it a bit, but that's totally okay. 3 and 4. Because it's still tapering, so it's fine. I did want it to scale in horizontally though, which is something that I'm ignoring with the way this is set up. So I'm still going to go in, grab these. Or I guess it still technically is, never mind. A bit of overthinking there. So now we're gonna have to cut this guy out, and then we can kind of just rinse and repeat what we just did. So I'm gonna start, yep, it's gonna automatically start in the corner there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Delete that. Snap these guys into place. Cool, cool. And yeah, just same thing on this side. Boom. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we can mesh combine these guys. Merge the vertices. Grab the edges that aren't touching this additional piece we just connected it to. Let's just do one side at a time actually, and just vertex snap it over to close it off. And merge those guys since they're resting on top of each other. Sweet. Let's actually transport this over to the other side. I'm curious, it seems like it doesn't seem totally level with this piece that we made in the last part. I do want to just reference that again. So this is forward, and then it does kind of seem like there's a piece that's going down. Let's try and weld it and see how it looks. I'm curious to see how that would turn out. So all I'm doing is grabbing all this geometry that we just made. We're going to open up our smart mesh tools, smart duplicate this. I'm just going to move it along the X to see where it lines up. So there's definitely some wiggle room here. And then sort of installing this piece should take no time at all. We're literally just adding in 2 edge loops. I'm going to squish them just to make sure that they're even. They should be. Snap them to the width of this. Literally select the whole ring and delete it. And then we can slot them in by putting our pivot in a corner, snapping it in. You know the drill. Mesh, combine. Gonna merge the vertices. Yeah, cool. Sweet. So that actually turned out to be much simpler than I expected. I thought, you know, getting a round shape was going to be more difficult than it was. I'm sure once we actually slot in the actual piece, we might come across some more difficulties, but there might just be like some things where we have to adjust some scaling, which shouldn't actually be too difficult. But that would all have to do with this one rounded piece, so we can go ahead and build off of these connectors that we just threw together, which is this here, I believe. Let's look at our more main reference piece. So how was this one done? So it just sort of looks like they put one of the bars across. I'm referencing this here. It's pretty hard to see what's going on, but this piece is going across. It's connected. And yeah, there's definitely this connection piece, but it looks like there's some hooks sticking out and some kind of gear or connector. Interesting. We might want to leave that part off a little bit longer, because what we could do is get in that larger cylindrical piece, and then like that is kind of one of the main chunks in the back, and we can start to really shape things around that. So it might be a wise idea to actually get that in, because all the smaller pieces will probably have to change. And by the large cylindrical piece, I'm of course referring to like this big chunk here, this guy, this piece here. So we can go ahead and try and get that guy into place. Kind because yeah, we should always typically be going biggest to smallest with this stuff, because we're gonna have to make a lot of changes, so we might as well sort of get our anchor piece in and build around it before we do anything. So I'm just trying to find a good solid reference of it. Well, I guess we can start by just sort of plopping in a cylinder, because regardless we're gonna have that in there. Yeah, and I guess this is actually a really good reference for the one that we were going to make. It has these sort of connection brackets and this spring in the middle. This is a good shot. We'll have to remember this one for later. Interesting. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to just start by getting a big cylindrical piece in there. Create polygon primitives, cylinder. I'll just go ahead and make this guy 36 because it's going to be larger. It's kind of one of the main shapes of the cylinder. And let's see where exactly it's placed. Well, obviously it's placed directly in front of this sort of loop that we made. I want to see if there's any other visual cues that sort of give away where it's connected. This hoop here seems to be positioned a little bit further back from that, which aligns with how we currently have it set up. Interesting, all these pieces down here. That'll definitely be something we'll have to do in a future part. But I guess we can just sort of start to get it into place. One thing I noticed is that there's this sort of turn piece and then this larger piece, and then the connection piece in the middle seems to be more what's resting on the piece that we just made. Yeah, this piece here, because this is definitely going lower than that. So okay, let's get the width down first, just to make sure it's symmetrical. I'll just snap it to these two pieces on either side. Just looking at reference to get a sense of scale. It kind of seems like it's taken up about half of the opening here. But yet again, we have nothing behind it to judge where exactly the halfway mark is. So if that's the case, I guess we're going to sort of have to, yeah, line it up with the piece that we made here. So this is halfway up. This is lined up in the middle. I'm just snapping it to this because we started with a ring, right? So we can sort of use that as a middle ground piece. Scale it down a little bit. That looks like it is kind of taking up halfway. Like if we were to duplicate this and put it in front, it's about 2 wide. I might even scale it up a smidge. And then it's just a question of how low do I want it. It definitely is lower than these guys by a decent amount, which is good to know. It might even be that it's just like, no, I guess not. It's more like that much lower, which is good to know. Let's see, what are the components that we have here? We have this sort of like metal connector piece that connects it to the side. But I guess all these seem to be a little bit different. If we look at our main reference, yeah, it has these connection pieces. It has this metal bar that's stretching across. The metal bar also seems to be exclusively inside. It's not sticking out or anything like that. So let's tackle the interior of this guy, because once we start going out here with these knobs, it starts to get a bit more complicated, as we can see in here and with this kind of stuff. So let's just focus on the main part for now. And then we can continue with the knobs a little bit later. So Interesting. Okay. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. I'm looking at it from every angle. There's also these pieces on the bottom. Yeah, so it seems pretty consistent throughout all of these reference images. I just need to make sure I know where they wrap down to on the bottom, because they're wrapping up, they're going and bolting onto the side of these metal pieces we made, and then a bolt is connecting them, or not a bolt, a bar is connecting them on both sides. And this actually should be a lot simpler, more simple than I expected, because we can just use symmetry to sort of make one, duplicate it over. So I just need to find a better example of the reference. Interesting, this one doesn't seem to have it, but that seems like a bit more of a more modern one. This seems like a pretty good reference I can work off of, so I'm going to put it off to the side. And what we can do with this is we can add, or rather, add edge loops, sort of select the faces we need. This is just an example. Smart duplicate it, and then from here we can say extrude it out, and we have these different pieces that we can start working from. Which is probably how we're going to go about doing this. Before we do that though, it's pretty clear with a lot of these reference images that there's some space between this and these metal pieces here, so I'm just going to scale it in a little bit, give it some breathing room, because we can see the metal bar that's sticking through it, so it's kind of like that. I just want to double check. Yeah, like we have that gap. It's not totally pressed against it or anything. So let's start with that thickness. That should be fine. And we can kind of make these metal pieces on the end. The cool thing about these is they're definitely standalone, and then they have this bar in the middle. These bottom pieces we can make later or at a different time. So there's no real rush to get those ones done. I do kind of want to tighten it up a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that technique I was talking about, where I sort of add a cut kind of like here. I'm just eyeballing the thickness of this guy. It's about so. So it comes up to the top. It wraps around over the edge. Maybe about so. We can smart duplicate that. We're going to want to give it some thickness. So we can Control E. It's very, very slight. Like just enough so that it's actually 3D. So 0.075 might be enough for this. I don't want it to be like paper thin, but it really doesn't have that much going on. Now we sort of need it to be going up at the top. So I can extrude this guy out, scale him. We just need a little piece that we can then extrude up here. It's not too tall, but it has this metal piece sticking out and across and over. I'm interested to see what the purpose of that is. There might be a bolt on the other side of it or something. Oh no, what am I saying? It's actually connected down here. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, this goes across, which I'm actually going to have this pretty close. But then we can scale this up. Actually looks like it's peeking over the edge. And we'll leave that the way it is for now. We're gonna have to sort of get this rounded lump, which might be a bit more of a challenge. So before we do that, let's go ahead and we might not need to go down that far. Let's go ahead and add that rounded bottom. I'm going to delete this so that I can have a bit more room to bevel. So I filled in that hole I'm actually going to pull this out a little bit because it seems like this is sticking out a bit. I might even give this some room so that I can pull this guy back again. And even just looking at this now, I kind of want to scale it in a little. Which of course means we can delete that. But yeah, let's go ahead and just, all we really have to do is take these edges, Control B to bevel, and do it kind of like so. Simple enough. One thing to keep in mind is that this, even though it has all these edges, isn't really rounding. So let's go ahead and try and fix that. In order to do that, we're going to have to connect these edges. So I'm just adding an edge between these vertices. You can use the cut tool. I'm just using sort of a tool that connects two vertices by adding an edge. So that's really quick. But now essentially it lets us select these edge loops and just sort of tuck them in a little bit more so they follow the shape. So that's looking a lot better. Cool. Let's add in that sort of hump shape that we were seeing here. So it seems to kind of take up this area. And even now that I'm looking at the reference, this might be a little bit too far back. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, select these pieces, and then pivot it over here. I kind of did want it to be a bit more forward, so that's looking good. We're just going to have to make sure we snap these. And then this edge is currently in the ground, so we're going to have to fix that. Cool. Just merge everything up. So yeah, let's get that hump piece in right about there. What is the best way to do this? I feel like I'm kind of overcomplicating it. I kind of want to just add in an edge loop here and an edge loop here, and then say like grab these faces, Control E, like grab it like that, and then if we delete these edges, we could just bevel them in, and that might work. It's worth trying out at the very least. So I'm only selecting these three edges because I don't want to destroy the transitions that we have set up around the cylinder. So let's select these two. I'm actually going to want to scale it in. It's tapered out, which might not make for the best bevel. So let's change our scaling tool to component. And interesting, one's working, one's not. We can just do one and duplicate it over. So let's scale that guy in like that. We can then, of course, delete this. And select these faces, smart duplicate face. This is the exact same, so it should have no problems snapping over. Mesh combine, merge those, and now we should have, oh, interesting. I guess at some point, whoa, something's going on here. Let's take a look. is interesting. One side's wider than the other. I'm glad we caught this. So I'm going to go ahead and just snap this to this. Just because it seems like the width at some point wasn't symmetrical. Weird. Yeah, we can merge that. We can then fill that hole and start to make this symmetrical. Or smooth, rather. Cool, so now we got that sort of hump shape to it. Merge those vertices. Cool, cool. One thing I'm noticing with this is it kind of seems like this plate is like resting inside of it, if that makes sense. I'm trying to make sense of why that would be or what exactly is going on. It might be that this, and this might actually make sense, this metal piece is bolted on to this thinner piece, which would make sense. So I guess we might actually want to delete this, as we'll be adding it back on in a second. So we can fill that hole again, make it its own piece. Yeah, because you can see here that this kind of looks like there's a gap here in the reflection. So we're gonna have to accommodate for that. Regardless, we have this sort of rolling piece that we need to stick into here. I'm really starting to think that this should only be 2 wide rather than 3. And that's going to bother me if I don't fix it, so I'm going to fix it. Sorry about that. I know that's kind of an inconvenience to just make that, but at least we know that we can do it really quickly. I'm just going to bridge this over. But yeah, this should take no time at all. Whoa, okay, okay. I'm just going to merge all these verts. Fill hole. Do the same thing there. And now we can extrude these guys out. I don't want them to be too big either. I'm just trying to look more at the reference now. It only seems to go at about that tall. Get rid of these edges on the side. We don't need them. And then Control B. Yeah, we're gonna have to taper these in. It's really the only way. But at least this time we know it's working. Okay. Let's try beveling that again. So that's actually like a proper semicircle. Cool. We can now sort of put our, I guess, bearing or bracket or some shape. I'm not exactly sure what that's doing. It might be there to sort of connect over here. I'll have to do some more investigating between recording sessions. But regardless, I'll take a look into it. I'm going to try and scale this in a little. Yeah. But yeah, we can add a cylinder right in the middle. So I'm actually going to poke face so we have a center point to work from. And we can get our cylinder. Control J to scale that over. We can also poke face here to get a middle point. So that should be directly centered. We can get rid of this guy now. I'm trying to look at this. It must cut into the metal because there's no way this is like completing. When I look at this, it kind of reminds me of the pieces that we made under here. But it definitely looks like it has to be cutting into the shape because there's no way it's fully rounding underneath there. Interesting. I'm going to just try and look at the 3D reference. And it just looks a lot smaller here. It looks like it is fully rounded, but it's smaller. So we might just go for that. And then in this 3D reference, it is fully rounded over. It's just cut out at the bottom, which is an interesting take on it. This might be cut out at the bottom. Or we could even just have it raising over, which it kind of, now that I'm looking at it, makes way more sense. Okay. Something like that. So it looks like it's very beveled on each side, a very soft shape. Kind of like so. Don't want to overdo it with the edge loops. Let's go ahead and soften those edges. And then it has this sort of ring in the middle where I'm assuming it's connected through. So we're going to have to go ahead and make that. Let's go ahead and select these circles. And we can hit Control E to offset it in just a tiny bit. I want to do like a 0.05 where we can then select these rings we just made and extrude them out. Of course, we're doing these in like tiny numbers, so 0.05 again is even too much, to like 0.025. 0.03. It does make me think that these are two separate pieces, so I kind of want to take this and make it into a different mesh. So I'm selecting these, Control, Shift, right click, extract faces. What we can then do is bridge this over so it's a solid piece. I'll explain why I'm doing this in just a moment. That's actually really cool that that just happened. So say you're ever trying to bridge a circle over like this, you go to Shift right click bridge and it does a spin. A quick way to get rid of that is if you just bridge one piece over and then you select both rings again and then hit bridge, should be smart enough. It's because I had these two pieces selected. But if you go Shift bridge, it'll be smart enough to know how it's connected. So the reason I'm filling this in is because I still want to be able to smooth it like this and have this bracket piece resting in it. I guess a better example would be if I added an edge loop there. But I want it to look like it's actually being smoothed in. And the easiest way to do that is to actually make it a separate mesh on its own. So with this then, all we really have to do is cap the ends. And another big reason that this is how I'm setting this up, just setting this back to world. Another reason this is the way I'm setting this up is because if these are two different meshes, when I get them out of ZBrush and re-import them, it's going to be a lot easier to select them and make them different materials. Because we're going to have to separate their materials in our ID mask. So that's just why I opt to do it that way. I also need to make these guys a bit softer. I guess we can let ZBrush handle that. I'll just leave that at how it is for now. And that should be fine the way it is. And then, I think for now, I think I'll leave it at that. Like I said, I wanted to do a bit of a shorter one today. It's been a pretty long weekend. It's Sunday night, and I think I'm going to call it a wrap there. So I'm going to regroup. I'm going to do a bit more research into the parts that we're making, and then I'm going to continue along in the next part. So if you guys want to keep going, of course, the next part is available. But for right now, I think it would be best if I just took a bit of a break. So thank you guys for watching this part. Yeah, I think we have a pretty good idea as to what's going on, and once this piece is done, the whole thing will start to fill in a lot more. I know I keep saying that, but this is definitely like the main one, so I'm excited about this one. Either way, guys, thank you guys for watching this part, and I look forward to seeing how yours turns out. See you in the next video. Peace.